Good afternoon, and welcome to the First Client Health IT Services Quarterly Research Highlights and Outlook cast outlining the recent results of the HITS benchmark. My name is Allison Crawford, and I will be your host for today's session. Tech Business Research's focus is to provide business research to accelerate our customers' success, and this webinar series is a part of our ongoing efforts to find new ways to support you and your business, help get the most out of your research investment. Professional services practice and our coverage of the healthcare IT services market at TBR continues to grow. We will connect our readers with our analysts every quarter. Through the connection, TBR and our analysts will relate our company-centric research to HITS trends to provide additional opinions and insights into the quarter's performance. In the next minutes, analyst Joe Walent and senior analyst John Caucis will delve into the trends driving the results featured in HITS quarterly report to which you subscribe, by Q&A of these trends and how that will affect you. We encourage you to send any questions or comments Q&A function or the chat function at any point during the presentation. I'll put them to Joe and John at the end of the webinar. If you'd like to set up a client inquiry for more detailed discussion, please reach out directly to Joe and John at the end of the webinar with a CC to your account executive to set up that discussion. Our experts have been covering the IT services market for a total of 16 years. She analyzed the market for the past 10 years and is TBR's resident expert in the government practice. John's research has been critical in the planning of his clients' black hat strategies. Joe is a HITS lead analyst and has been a linchpin in the program since its initial coverage of CSC. His insight into the performance of the HITS vendors is unparalleled in the industry, and his guidance has assisted countless clients with their strategic planning. Now, let me hand this over to Joe and John. John?
Thanks, everyone, for joining us today. Before we begin reviewing the results from the Health IT Services Benchmark Study, I'd like to take a moment to familiarize you with some recent enhancements to TBR's Health IT Services Research Program. First, we have expanded the reports for the 5 companies that we currently cover, those companies being IBM Global Services, HP Services, Dell Services, Accenture, and CSC. We currently cover those companies on a semi-annual basis, the Health IT Services activities of those companies. We've expanded upon that to include an additional focus on their activities in the government sector. So most relevant for today, we have a number of enhancements to the end of the quarter benchmark report. We've expanded the coverage to include a broader cross-section of the market participants. We've shed some companies, but we've added some others. We have a total of 18 companies now that we follow from a financial perspective. And we believe that this refined list is a better reflection of the dynamic and ever-changing nature of the HITS environment. We have included some pure-play companies such as Allscripts and Cerner. We added some of the India-centric offshore service providers like Infosys, as well as some of the government-centric legacy government contractors such as General Dynamics and Harris. We believe this expanded list will better enable us to gauge the overall pulse of the marketplace going forward. One of the others that we made to the end of the quarter benchmark report was to implement the benchmark scoring model, in which all the companies are benchmarked against one another based on their performance across a series of quantitative metrics. The subscribers to the service will see that at the beginning of each of our benchmark reports, we have each of the companies ranked. I won't get into the methodology here for the sake of time, but we're happy to discuss with any of you the underlying methodology there. So with a summary of today's primary topics. Our presentation today is going to focus on 3 areas. First of all, the growers and the key drivers of their growth in the first calendar quarter of 2012, which is internal investments, their activities with respect to acquisitions, as well as their business development activities, investments they're making to actively expand their client relationships, as well as add new client logos to their client rosters. Secondly, we'll also look at vendor activity in the merger and acquisition area. We'll talk a little bit about some of the key acquisitions that were made during the quarter, as well as key acquisitions that impacted the growth of the companies that we're following in the health IT space, both commercially centric companies as well as their counterparts in the public sector. And then the point that we'll touch on today is growth in health IT spending by the U.S. federal government, luring in health players into the fray, health IT services firms, both commercially centric as well as their counterparts in the government sector, to take advantage of this opportunity as an area, whereas some areas of government spending are shrinking and contracting. Many players see this as an area where they can continue to expand their relationship with their federal government agencies and clients to continue to grow their revenue base there. And with Joe Walent to the table, and he and I will walk through the remainder of the results in greater detail.
Thank you. Thank you, John, and thank you, Allison. Taking a look at slide 6, I'd like to begin by orienting you to the graph. We see on the x-axis we have the healthcare services revenue, TTM growth. Y-axis is the margin on a TTM basis for the companies. There's grouping right at where the averages meet, and then we have individual companies outlined for each. Also, the size of the sphere indicates the size of the revenue for the quarter for each particular company. First thing I'd like to draw our attention to is the average healthcare TTM growth for the quarter was 11.9%. This was based on the growth from the companies in the syndicated benchmark model, and comparative to the overall IT services model, which was only 10.3, HIT's growing at a much faster rate. Now, 10.3 was derived from the PSBQ vendor benchmark, and in that, the analysis is that further deceleration is anticipated, while we're looking for, or much less deceleration. We're expecting average growth to stay at near present levels. Another example I'd like to compare to is the public sector, drawn our PSBQ public sector benchmark. The overall IT services market for public sector was growth of 0.9% in 1Q12. So I think that there is a large amount of push to move into the HIT space, especially when traditional government IT service vendors are looking and anticipating contracting spending and overall market shrink. The second point, looking at this, is what the leaders are doing. We have CGI and Harris to our right at near 90% growth. Harris has expanded its capabilities, especially its acquisition of Care FX, in an effort to improve its capabilities around interoperability. Now, this is a good play for Harris, in our opinion, because of their legacy experience in the sector, working with public sector companies, and the drive for them to improve their overall efficiency and use of health IT. CGI is in the similar vein with a large government practice and has a acquisition of Stanley that increased exposure to the federal government, but has also increased its investments around specialized products for those government players in their Connect product. And so that's been in part of the driver of increased interest and increased revenue for them. Allscripts had recent acquisition or a merger with Eclipsis, which really increased its overall scale and market exposure in the EHR and patient data connectivity market. However, there are some problems with integration that can persist, and we do see Allscripts overall revenue growth decelerating in the coming quarters. Looking at general dynamics, their large acquisition of Vangent has produced an instant expansion of their HITS-related revenue, and we anticipate that this is also going to allow them to move also into the state and local space, and based on the BPO and capability that they got with Vangent acquisition. Looking up a slide at the Cognizant and Infosys, the Indo-centric players that are showing strong growth in the HITS area. The drivers in this have been Caucis successfully over its for market expansion and close client relationships to the health sector. It's been consistently reinvesting funds to subject matter experts and put them in close proximity to clients, would allow them to, identify additional opportunities and to for doing revenue expansion, and also ICD-10 transitions. Infosys is also looking to ICD-10 transitions as a strong area, but also has a legacy of working with insurance companies, so it has a special in with the payer market in regard to HITS, and we that is an area where they'll continue to drive growth going forward. Looking at the revenue growth leaders, we have to look at CSC, which has had a setback with their NHS contract, which impaired revenue for the past quarter and the previous quarter. With the negotiations seemingly moving forward, but at a very slow pace, they've had to write off a lot of the investments that also impacted their margin for the sector. Also, the third point, turning to margin, we can see CERN is looking the whole scope or companies across the board with its higher than margin, the average. Based concentration on developing and marketing its form-based software. Now, this is something that is with some other software players that we cover at TBR, especially the benchmark, where software providers are able to services investment by having implementation expertise and management just for their own product, and they limit their outlays and keep more of the money for themselves for product. We do this with SAP and Oracle in the vendor benchmark. Turn it over to you, John, for additional comments.
Okay, thanks, Joe. A comment I'd like to also make with respect to the large multinational companies in particular, limited to IBM Global Services, Accenture, and Xerox Services as well. We see an increase in with respect to R&D, and this is something that we're witnessing across multiple verticals in addition to the healthcare space. So much like these companies are doing to increase redevelopment and develop new solutions in the financial services space and the manufacturing sector and other sectors, they are also making new R&D investments to develop platforms, to analytics solutions. Big data and analytics is an area for their healthcare clients to accelerate their growth. I mean, many of these companies already have very large health IT services revenue bases, and now they are looking to push that growth lever on if you look at our chart to the right and close the gap with the growth leaders through the development of new platforms and analytics, which will be driven by R&D investments. So the key takeaways from here: we growth in the first calendar quarter of 2012, driven primarily by merger and acquisition activity, but by not only inorganic investments, but internal investments in developing solutions in growth areas such as platforms, big data analytics, interoperability, as well as investments in business development to expand client rosters. With that, I'll move to page 7, and I'll turn the Joe.
So on slide 7, we're looking at organic versus overall revenue growth for the companies covered in the HITS benchmark. Our eyes drawn immediately to Harris with its 82% growth for the quarter, based primarily on its acquisition, and we can say that this is kind of does tie into the first trend that we're seeing for M&A activity for the fragmented HITS market, where vendors are leveraging acquisitions to drive deeper into the HITS space. Harris previously had some exposure to the HITS market, but with the acquisition of KFX, was able to increase its exposure and also its ability to engage with agencies as far as the interoperability of their individual HITS systems that might have been disparate in previous quarters. Looking at this as a strong movement for Harris, we expect it to be a foundational move for them, and they will continue to make investments both internally, and we see them making additional acquisitions going forward. Back to this vein was the General Dynamics acquisition of Vangent last year, where they were able to have a large splash in the HITS space by a larger place at the table with the decision of Vangent and enhancing its own capabilities as well as its exposure to agencies already operating with Vangent and cross-sell their existing internal HITS capabilities. Finally, also had SC with its purchase-realized consulting last year to its own EHR and consulting systems integration capabilities as it applies to HITS. We see it as a strong move to diversify within the federal space into healthcare more aggressively, while also allowing them to create more knowledge base to apply to in commercial sector as well. The trend thing as far as acquisitions is with regard to scale, and we feel that the Allscripts buy of Eclipsis clearly falls into this. It was an example where they were looking to become a much larger, significant player in the EHR and overall in health IT data space. Although there are some problems with the integration, and we see that this may not give them the positive momentum that they need to sustain a leadership position in the marketplace going forward. Finally, the acquisition of capability, and this area that CSC exemplified in face of its engagement, iSoft to provide integration of the services that it's offering, in fact, and to enhance its portfolio and fill gaps that it had in approaching markets outside the UK, especially in the US and in the APAC region. So from these areas, we see that the M&A activity will continue at least present pace. Looking ahead, we see more developments, and I'll turn it over to John to go over those.
So in short, primary drivers of M&A activity in the health IT space over the last year to 18 months. Certainly, with regard to the players that have a limited footprint in the space, the desire to dive deeper into the overall health IT services market, or at least a segment of it, the care space, the provider space, the government space, and going forward, perhaps even the international markets. Secondly, and the best example of this is Allscripts, gain scale for companies that currently have a large footprint in the health IT services market, build on that. And finally, and this is the board, leverage acquisitions to enhance one's existing portfolio and capabilities, perhaps in niche areas, but most certainly in areas such as EHR, EMR implementation, integration capabilities. We see perhaps we'll see the data and analytics being a driver of acquisitions going forward. And then, given the increased clarity from the recent Supreme Court affirmation of President Obama's healthcare initiative, as Joe said, we do see M&A activity being sustained at least at the current pace for the remainder of 2012. We have seen a bit of an uptick as we've moved into analyze the activity in the health IT space in the second calendar quarter of 2012, but at least see the overall pace being sustained. Still a fair amount of uncertainty in the space, due mostly to the upcoming presidential and congressional election in November, that is keeping some firms from acquiring new capabilities or leveraging acquisitions to expand their current skill sets. Clarity in the direction of the marketplace following the election could invite more companies to enter the acquisition, though we still get the sense that some may choose to sit on the sidelines until the future of the healthcare legislation, President Obama's healthcare legislation, is more certain. To page 8 and hand things back over to Joe to talk about what being in the federal health IT space.
Thank you. So slide 8, we have depicted our outline of our expected investment by federal agencies in the IT space. We're looking for near double-digit growth in compound annual growth rate, as well to eventually reach about $6 billion annually in 2016. So the federal government is promoting the adoption of healthcare IT and anticipated to continue through 2014 with incentives from the Tech Act for use, as well as the ICD-10 regulatory adherence, where we'll have, or companies will need, providers and payers will need to adopt ICD-10. We also see the actual investment by government agencies as a root driver of overall HITS expansion, where many of the HITS systems that are going into practice at the agencies will form a sound basis and for commercial products expand out into the provider and payer spaces as well. So that said, we've seen additional players flocking to the federal space. An example is Xerox Services with position on the CIO SP3 contract put out by the National Institute of Health. Now, this Xerox has a developed practice with its acquisition of ACS several years ago, and has actually been pushing into getting into more federal business. And we feel that winning this position on the contract, as well as task orders under it, has been a strong indication that more large players are looking to the federal government HIT space as a sustaining and pacing to grow their HIT businesses. We see additional engagement, and we will be looking to expand further into the civilian and the defense healthcare IT market. With recent uphold ACA, touched on by John a moment ago, by the Supreme Court, we anticipate more states having to either investments or make decisions around the expansion of Medicaid and how they're going to go with that. In that regard, they need expertise to navigate the rules and regulations, and we see that the traditional players such as AS, Xerox Services, CSC, and also HP Enterprise Services as key players in put that together, providing advisory services as well as technical expertise to enable states to quickly and efficiently adopt any those changes needed for Medicaid expansion, or if they choose to opt out, how best to stay in compliance with the existing regulations. HP was able to work with 20 states' Medicaid programs to ensure that they are in compliance with the HIPAA program and or the HIPAA requirement of 550. And this is an additional touch point that they'll have with those states with coming changes to the Medicaid program going on, and that HP services, enterprise services, will be that much more in the forefront and be able to secure greater potential revenue streams coming from these states. Observations. I'm going to hand it over to John to sum up.
All right. Just a couple of other points I'd like to make. Not only about how the federal interest of the market, but how federal activities are driving increased health IT spend outside of the federal sector, most notably in the payer sector. The Medicaid services through the HR incentive program, through April of this year, had paid a total of just over $5 billion to over 94,000 Medicare and Medicaid physicians and hospitals. Later, that total had increased by almost $600 million to about $5.6 billion, and the number of physicians and hospitals that received these incentive payments had grown to over 110,000. You know, we certainly see this pace continuing going forward, especially, you know, if after the upcoming election, if the President Obama's healthcare program is in place and there's additional clarity with respect to its future. So with that, summarizing the key points from TBR Health IT Services benchmark study for the first calendar quarter of 2012. First, organizations across the health IT space, payers, providers, government agencies, government departments, IT investments in new systems, or making investments to improve existing systems, primarily to realize greater cost efficiencies, but also improve the healthcare experience for the consumer. Winning their health IT competencies and obtaining new IT-related intellectual property and being the primary impetus behind merger acquisition activity through the remainder of 2012 and into 2013. As said, we expect the pace of M&A activity to be sustained at the relatively modest pace that we've seen since mid-2011. And then all areas of government, federal, state, and local, as well as in international government markets, with IT-related outlays and investments increasing, which will in turn attract new entrants to the fray and incent existing government contractors to reshape their portfolios through the addition or the acquisition of health IT services and solutions. Begin taking questions.
John, and as they say in radio, the phone lines are open. We've got 3 questions that have come in. The first one, John, came in when you were talking about HITS M&A vendors. And so the question was, could you go into more detail about the potential target areas for HITS vendors' M&A activity?
That have niche expertise in areas where the hiring company would want to either expand their capabilities or drive into as a new area. Big data and analytics. Jump in any additional information here?
No, I think you're on the main area where most companies are going to be looking to expanding. It's going to be involve analytics layer, and if they don't already have the capability or are fast developing that capability in-house, they're going to be turning to niche providers looking to acquire that IP and bring it in to an additional layer of analysis and utility for the data to individual providers at the pay level across the marketplace. I think that this is one particular area where, analytics is going to be an area of interest across all 5 areas that we look at in the HITS coverage of individual companies as well as the benchmark. I also think that mobility is a big area where many of the HITS vendors are going to need to either register, use their own products, or develop additional capabilities via acquisition. I think that, or alliances, but I think that could be a strong area where we'll see more and more of the players actually developing capabilities. And I think that, that applies to, the government players as well as the commercial players.
And just one final comment there. It's challenging to kind of encapsulate in a nutshell the single group or a single sector of potential acquisition targets, primarily because this market in many ways is very fragmented. I would certainly agree with Joe. Expanding existing capabilities. If a company has a desire to move into a niche area, that could drive M&A activity as well.
The next question that came in is, what will the impact of the SCOTUS decision on the ACA to the HIT marketplace be?
Well, I think that's a very good question. I think the near-term impact is that the clarity that market participants gained with the decision by the Supreme Court really is going to allow people to essentially crystallize their strategies. And as John alluded to, while there's a presidential election in the offing, I think by having the decision upheld, it allows vendors to effectualize their strategy depending on who takes the White House in November. They'll be able to, anticipate demand should it go one way or the other, and will allow them to engage with their clients and present those different strategies and what they'd be able to do at the provider level, at the government level, or at the peer level, depending on how wind blows this fall.
I also wanted to note there's still a lot of uncertainty in the market just in the upcoming election. And while we've that the Supreme Court's decision provides clarity, and some have even said made it more difficult down the road for opponents of legislation to overturn it. That has not completely dispelled the atmosphere of uncertainty that still surrounds the bill. So surrounds the legislation rather. So I think a minor short-term impact of the Supreme Court's decision. Ultimately, we're still going to have to wait and see what happens after the November elections, and what the ultimate impact on the Affordable Care Act is.
Great, thanks. And as all analysts love the predictions question, the final question I think would be good to wrap up on we got was, how do you see the HITS market evolving?
Jump in on that. I think that's a big thing that we can anticipate is more specialization from all the players. I think the exhibitors or the recent entrants or people that are buying niche capabilities to expand their portfolio are all going to begin to pursue segments of the market. I think we're going to see fewer and fewer people looking to be all things to all clients in the HIT space. I think while end-to-end solutions for particular aspects will be certainly available, I think that there is going to be concentration on a provider solution or a payer solution. You're not going to have that overarching or umbrella kind of policy coming from as many players going forward. I think the fragmentation in the market and also like the incredible rate at which it's moving right now is going to demand that people pick a specific aspect of it to go after, and then look to be the lead player in that aspect, and rather than an overall all things to all people.
And along those lines, I also see from a public sector perspective, or from the perspective of legacy contractors to the federal government, with the ongoing cuts to defense spending and spending in other areas, including IT, but with the continued growth of spending in the healthcare arena, you're going to see more companies that may have been playing in the health IT space increase their focus there. We do have a handful of government-centric companies, and I think this illustrates the example as well. In the benchmark report, folks such as Harris and General Dynamics, now you may not see as big a splash being made as was General Dynamics with their acquisition of Vision, but you're going to see increased investment by companies like Northrop Grumman or Lockheed Martin, legacy government contractors, to diversify their portfolios, to diversify away from the impact of defense cuts and the drawdown of operations in Iraq and Afghanistan, et cetera, and in the health market, not only for the government, but we're finding that these companies are also looking at their portfolios and seeing opportunities to serve clients outside of the public sector.
Last question. So what I'd like to do now, I want to thank everyone for their time, and thanks to Jim and John for the presentation. You can follow Joe and John on Twitter, and I've listed their Twitter handles here for more of information and breaking insights on the work that they're doing in the HIT sector. We really enjoyed this interaction, and thanks everyone for their questions. We look forward to continuing the dialogue over the next quarter. We'll have the chat function open for another couple of minutes to give folks any last-minute questions they want to send through. We'll be able to field those, and we look forward to seeing you guys all again next quarter. Have a good afternoon.